Welcome back. You've learned a lot about computer programming, and I know you're eager to start making a game. So before we turn to graphics, which adds another set of complexities, let's put together everything you've done to make a basic text-based game. This is a very useful thing to know how to do because lots of educational games and adventure games and so on can be made with this sort of a format. And it's a good way to tie together all the various programming skills you've learned before we start adding a game engine. So let's take a look. This is sort of a classic game. You see it here. I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 100. Guess my number, and I'll tell if you're too high, too low, or correct. So I can't wait. Let's play this game with the computer. I'm going to go ahead and type a 50. See? Okay, I'm guessing 50. That was too high. Okay, let's try again. I'm going to say 25. That was too high. What is this thing? Okay, let's try 12. That was too low, so let's try, I don't know, what are you saying, like a 20? That's too high. I don't know, we're getting close. Let's go with like an 18. Correct! Yes! I did it in 5 tries. Okay, and that's cool. I can check my guess. I can try again. Hey, that try again button wasn't there before, was it? See, no, it's gone. Oh, cool. Okay, so there's a simple little game. It allows me to interact. And it's kind of fun in a sort of silly little way. So what we're going to do is, of course, we're going to put together all of the skills that you have learned so far to be able to build this game. Now, of course, it's not fair to ask to build a game before you can visualize it, but, you know, what's the point of a game that's already been written? The whole idea is, how do I design a game that hasn't been written yet without writing it? Yeah, it's kind of a Zen-like question. But it turns out this is an important part of the game development process, and that's where we start right here. The first thing you do when you design a game is you put away your computer and you get out your pencil. I usually use a whiteboard or something, but we draw it. Before we actually try and create it, we draw it. Let me show you a drawing that I used to design this particular program. Now, I went ahead and did it with a graphics program on the computer because you don't want to have to read my handwriting. But essentially, this is how I design a computer game. Even a very simple one like this. What do? Well, you draw things out and you explain what everything is. Let's take a look at what this tells us. So you can see I have sort of a rough sketch of what the form looks like. Okay, that's great. It doesn't have to be exact. What I care about is what kind of things do I have? How are they arranged? What are they called? Okay, and so when you look, I see, oh, I have this thing called output. That seems to be a div, because the term output doesn't tell me that's a div, right? I have this thing called txt input. I bet you that's going to be a text box for input. Here's a button. I made my buttons gray so I could tell the buttons apart, I guess. Okay, so there's a button and there's another button. This button doesn't have any particular name. This one does. Now, why would it need a name? Good question. Whenever I have a button, well, the whole point of buttons is to invoke functions, right? So whenever I have a button, that means I'm going to need a function. I'm going to write down what function it calls. Here's another button that's going to call a function. So what function does that guy call? Init. Aha. So by starting with this diagram, I now know what objects I'm going to have to build in HTML. I also have a pretty good idea what functions I'm going to need to write. But there's more I need to think about before I start writing code. I want to explain what is going to happen in each of these things. So for this output, I'm going to initialize that with some instructions, and then during the game, this is going to say too high, too low, or correct. So that tells me the content of this is going to be changing dynamically. Now this is input, and that input is going to be converted to a numeric variable. We'll call it guess. Okay, that's making sense, right? Okay. Now we need to think about what happens in initialization, where we're going to create variables for all the form elements. That's normally what you do in an initialization, right? If you have form elements, you make variables for them. I'm going to get a random number between 0 and 100. But wait, you say, I don't know how to do that. Right, write that down. We'll figure it out next. Get a random number between 0 and 100. We're going to store that number in a variable we'll call correct. I like it. And then we're going to put some instructions in the output, and we're going to hide this button again, so it's going to be invisible. Yes, there's ways to do that. I'll show you. We can make buttons visible and invisible. That's so cool. It's like a superpower. All right, so now I understand what init should do. What about check guess? Okay, let's think about what that's going to do. Well, it's going to get some input from the txt input. It's going to put that in the variable guess. It's going to compare guess to correct. Is guess equal to correct? And it's going to report high or low or correct, right? Okay, is it too high? Is the guess too high? Is the guess too low? Is it correct? All right, and if it is correct, you win. We show the button again. They can play again. If it's not correct, we'll implement some sort of a turn counter and tell them what turn it is. Make sense? Okay, now we think about what else we need to know. Well, what global variables do we have? Well, a lot of them, actually. We have guess. That contains the user's guess. Correct, that will be the randomly generated correct answer. Turns, how many turns since this game began. Output, that represents this div. Button again. Now this button has to have a variable attached to it because I'm going to do something to it in code. And then txt input would be good too. I didn't have that listed here. That might be local or it might be global. Okay, so does this make sense? Does this make sense? Do you see what we did here? We have done a lot of thinking about what happens in our game. And how much code have we actually written? None. None whatsoever. Well, that's not exactly true. That's not exactly true. It is true that we haven't written any actual syntax. But whenever I hear somebody say you can be a game designer without being a game programmer, I say shenanigans to that. Because this is a game design. Here I have clarified all that I'm going to need to know. When I have all this well thought out, converting it to code, not going to be difficult. It's going to be quite simple. The difficult part was understanding what I needed. And if I were not a programmer, there is no way I would have guessed at this. None. Just wouldn't happen. You know, you can draw pretty pictures, but you have to kind of know what it is that you're trying to do. If you don't know what programming is, how are you going to set up a system that a programmer will be able to implement? Yeah, that's just the truth. We do have some people who do game design in my studio, but I don't hire a single person who doesn't know how to program. In fact, most of the game design is done by me, and I can program everything I design. So, okay, does this make sense? This is how we start a game. Now come back and we'll take a look at how we actually implement it. But before we can do that, well, one thing we learn when we build a new object is sometimes I have a new skill I need to learn. And so in this case, how do we generate random numbers? So the next thing we'll look at is how do we generate random numbers within a range? And then when we understand that, we'll come back and we'll put all this together and we'll build this game. I know you're excited. I'm excited. Okay, I'll see you then.